Yana Savchuk was a young Russian hairdresser. Probably the only mistake she made was marrying a man who didn't love her, to the point of beating and killing her. But Yana could have been saved. When she called the police in November, saying that her husband was going to kill her, the police officer who arrived cast off her cries for help as ridiculous. "If you get killed, we will definitely come to examine the body. Don't worry," he said, as he recorded on the victim's phone, before leaving without offering protection. 40 minutes later, Yana was dead, beaten by the same man the police refused to arrest. Personally, I've always been stunned in front of the episodes of domestic violence and femicides in my country. But when one day I read an article on an Italian newspaper, I was startled to discover the epidemic proportion that this phenomenon had reached in Russia. And on the top of that, I was shocked reading about a new law. Domestic violence in Russia kills at least 12,000 women every year, according to the Human Rights Watch. Official Russian Interior Ministry statistics point to 4 million reported cases of abuse in 2015. This statistic does not include the likely high number of unreported cases, because over 70% of the women who call the hotline don't press any charges. Russian women and others around the world don't call to report violence because of feelings of shame or fear of retribution. But until the end of 2016, there was a law outlawing the abuse. The convicted abusers faced up 2 years in prison because justifiably women and children were considered the most vulnerable subjects. But in January, the State Duma presented a proposal for a legislation on the decriminalization of domestic violence and abuses against women. The law was approved by 380 votes for and just 3 against. From now, any episode of domestic violence will be punished with just a fine of $500, unless the woman doesn't report a broken bone, of course. If it happens again, but only with an interval of at most 1 year, it will be considered a crime. So, this allows Russian men to beat their wife once a year. But what can be the cause of the change? It is part of a state-sponsored turn to traditionalism during Vladimir Putin's third presidential term. It has exposed deep fault lines. Many Russians now embrace the liberal notion of individual rights, but others are moving in the opposite direction. As we can see, this is a trend that shows up in many countries where the democracy is not completely affirmed, and when authoritarian leadership want to prove the moral high ground of their traditional values in front of other countries, especially Western democracies. This way of thinking spreads also in other settings, like the rights of gay, religious minorities, etc., and involves even some European countries, like Hungary or European populist political parties. We must remember that also in Italy, only many years after the approval of the democratic constitution, the mitigation of punishment of honor killing and the marriage as a reparation for rape were definitively cancelled. The debate in Russia began in 2016, when the government decided to decriminalize battery, which was the least violent form of assault in the Russian statute books. In Russia, there wasn't a specific law about violence against women and children, considering that they were the weakest subject and they should have been protected more than other victims. So, with the decriminalization of battery, the government decided to exempt domestic abuse. It exploits the civil society groups, but on the other side, the Orthodox Church was furious. Scripture and Russian tradition allow, like the Bible says, a reasonable and loving use of physical punishment as an essential part of the rights given to parents by God Himself. Religious leaders have long advocated for less interference in family affairs. We think that the term domestic violence is connected to ideas of radical feminism, where a man is often portrayed as a potential aggressor, said the Church Commission on Family Affairs on a 2015 statement. This contradicts multiple research results that say that a family based on marriage is the safest environment for women and children. And furthermore, the conservative groups reproach that in case of violence against children, parents might face jail. They argue that it was wrong for parents to face harsher punishment for eating their child than a neighbor would. All those considerations brought the disconcerting situation of today. The members of the Russian parliament say that this law is a condition to create strong families and to defend traditional values. They also say that episodes of domestic violence are family matters and the government shouldn't interfere. Yelena Mizulina, a senator known for promoting laws against gay propaganda, has pushed the latest change, saying that women are not offended when we see a man beating his wife. The parliament speaker, Vyacheslav Volodin, said that the bill was necessary to do everything in order to preserve families. But what Russian activists are really sick of is not the reaction by the institutions, is not the reaction by the church, but is the behavior of the police officers who have to respond to the emergency calls. All too often, they undervalue the situation. Or, even worse, they attack the victims interpreting the claim as slander and leveling a fine. A retired policeman affirmed that many times his colleagues placed blame on the victims for nagging their husbands into beating them. Because of this situation, and because of the fear of the reaction of the policeman, the woman who called the hotline then would write any official complaint. The situation would repeat until the day they would arrive too late and the woman would be found thrown out of a window, strangled, beaten, or stabbed to death. Now, what I really want you to understand is that the real need of victims is legal help and emotional support. More people are concerned with why women stay in abusive relationships than why men are abusing them. But remember that every victim needs to be protected because the domestic part doesn't matter. Violence is violence. Thank you.